Is Lizelotte worth your Everstones? Welcome back to Corky Gachas, and this is the exact question we are going to answer today. And we are going to go through her stats, her skills, her rotation, as well as the pros and cons, potentially good teammates, and also giving a final verdict at the end. So starting up first, we're going to take a look at her overall profile as well as her stats when compared to other similar units. So she's a demon unit and is classified as a Dex Ranger under the buff category. So looking at the stats wise, her attack is at a whopping 74k with her artifact applied. Of course, when compared to other rangers, they are only at 65k on the upper limit if I remember correctly. And on the defense side, it's quite average, right? 5k is average for a ranger, Dex Ranger. And then HP wise, she's decent, but I don't think her HP is on the upper limit for compared to other rangers. I do see other rangers with higher HP around 53k, so 30k less on that aspect. Crit rate wise, she has a mediocre crit rate at 13%. Most people or most other rangers would have a crit rate buff up around 20 to 30% with their artifact because they have the artifact with a crit rate, right? But I don't think that she has such a thing, so that's why her crit rate is kind of mediocre. But her crit damage is very high at 75%, and also accuracy is decent. Evasion is pretty much average, if not above average. Speed wise, 100 is always standard, and then she does have lifesteal from her artifact. So overall, I think her stats are on the upper limit, and rightfully so, because she's a demon unit. She has to have higher stats, but her crit rate is kind of mediocre. But I do think that this is not as much of a problem because of something that I'm going to cover later. So moving on to her skills, we're going to first take a look at her first sub skill, which is the Rain of Annihilation, Erase, and this one brings down the Rain of Annihilation and dealing AoE damage, right? 240% at max damage to enemies in a 3.5 meter wide and 9 meter long area, and removes 3 buffs effects at max. And this is quite significant, the area, when I've seen being tested, right? It does affect a lot of units, so all of them would have their buff effects removed, which is quite good, to be honest. However, that is not her main highlight. Her main highlight is actually the second one, which is Power Reversal Paradox, and this one, it brings down a spear, reversing the power flow of power and then dealing 280% damage, while this also, right, reversing stats, right, technically. So if your opponent would have a specific buff effect, meaning if they were to have defense buff, a physical resistance or magical resistance buff, those buff would be decreased by 36%, and the effect cannot be cleansed off. Very insane. So meaning all those good units, meta units like Chloe, which have her physical magical resist up when she is of a certain low HP for one time in a battle. Also Catherine, whereby for any low HP teammates you have, she would increase their physical magical resistance. So all these kind of things, right, they would be reversed, so to speak. So I think that this is the main highlight for her sub-skill kit, because it effectively nullifies a lot of units, and notably I would say Dora is one of those units that rely heavily on physical and magical resistance. So when you meet them in Battlefront and you have Liz countering her, right, aiming this spear on her, she's basically done. You don't have to worry about her anymore. So I think that is one of her very strong skill aspect for this skill itself. Next, we're going to touch on her passive, which is Amplify Limit Break. What this means is at max amplification effect change to 100%. For all of this buff that are being listed, 100% more of effectiveness is going to be applied to any of this buffs, right? Meaning if someone gives her 30% attack, like a Haru gives her 30% attack, she's going to amplify it and make it 60%. Very insane, right? Be it crit rate, be it defense, be it HP, crit damage, accuracy, evasion, physical resistance, magical resistance, lifesteal, as well as speed. Very insane kit overall. I think that this is the one of the highlights, right, when it comes to outside of her sub skill. Of course, her passive is the reason why she's so OP, and also this is the reason why I think that her lower crit rate can be compensated, given the fact that if you really want to go for a like Jiho, and the Jiho effect will be times 2, right? So meaning her crit rate will then be matched against other units as well. But honestly, crit rate isn't the biggest problem, because we are going to touch on her main skill, which is Dark Spear Destrodo, and this one does 240% attack as well as 100% extra for each buff that she have, right? I do think that it stacks for multiple buffs also, meaning if you have 2 stacks of attack buffs, it's going to count as 2, right? It wouldn't be like counting only as 1 and only counting the highest one. Nope, it's going to count as 2 stacks. So for every single stack of it, it's going to count an extra 100% attack. Very, very crazy. She's the opposite of Violette, right? Violette relies on debuffs while she relies on buffs. So this is the reason why Liz is so strong in raids, because you can stack a bunch of buffs on her through like Haru, Talia, Vivi, all these kind of units, right? Even Jiho, and effectively make her super stacked up, and that's why her main skill is going to do a lot of damage. And notably, one more thing, which is why I say that crit rate isn't going to be the biggest matter, especially for raids, is because if there are no other enemies within 3 meters, it always becomes critical hit. How insane is this? So if you can ensure that she have no one near her, or rather the enemies have no one near them, you are going to always get crit hit. And on top of that, one last thing I'm going to mention is that her artifact, right? Later I'm going to touch on what it does, but her artifact gives a lot of these buffs that she needs, and also she's going to be times 2 this buffs, right? For herself, and that is the reason why the whole overall kit, I think it's quite complementary, and almost all the time you're going to at least have 3 buffs on her, right? So you're always going to be looking at least 540%. The only sketchy part is whether there are units near her. If there's no, like, near her enemies, if there are units near her enemies, she might not crit given her low crit rate, which is a problem. But of course, for Battlefront, you can reset, but I'll touch on that later. So I think main skill very sick already, right? 540%. Even her sub skill like Reign of Annihilation also does decent amount of damage, to be honest, but the removal of buff is really the ultimate goal, right? And also her ultimate skill, which we are going to touch on right now, is basically a duplicative of the main skill, right? It's similar to Violette in her kit also. So Indignation Mono Locker, so summons an apocalyptic spear and deals like 310% and additional 110% for each buff as well. Similarly, if there's no enemies near 3 meters of the target, the attack will become a critical hit. So this does even more damage than the main skill. However, you can think of it as quite similar to the main skill, and honestly the multipliers are quite similar, which means that even if you don't use her ultimate skill, I would still think that she's going to be relevant with her main skill just with the damage itself, right? So still very strong even with the ultimate skill, but of course when you are using Lizelotte, I would prefer to hyper carry with her, which is why I think that this overall kit, you do want it to use both main as well as ultimate skill, and then load up as many buffs on her as possible. So lastly, we're going to touch on her artifact skill. So Lizelotte's artifact skill is Spear of Darkness, and what it does is that when she enters combat, her accuracy increases by 6, critical damage increases by 6%, mana recovery increases by 10%. However, at Legendary Plus, it's going to more than double, right? So becoming accuracy 15, and then critical damage 15%, mana recovery 20%. So the big thing here you have to take note is that this artifact skill complements her passive, right? Meaning the passive will kick in, she will in fact receive double the amount here. So it's 30 accuracy, critical damage is 30%, and mana recovery doesn't double, unfortunately. It's not one of those buffs that she does double. So mana recovery is still at 20%, but it's already very good. And overall, I would say that this artifact skill is very ridiculous because her main skill relies on the number of buffs that she's going to get to deal damage, right? Additional damage. So naturally, if she's alive, she's going to already get 2 of these buffs on her, meaning the 100% that you're looking at her main skill is naturally going to be at counter 2. Her main skill is going to do minimum 440% damage. Very insane. Without any other teammates, just by herself, she's doing 440%. And then mana recovery becoming increased by 20%. When you compile with someone like Vivi, someone like Talia, her main skill is coming up ridiculously fast. So she's going to be able to burst multiple times in one shot. So moving on, I'm going to touch on her skills rotation for you to see exactly how she functions. And right now on screen, you should be able to see her rotation laid out in full for you. And what is surprising, or rather not exactly surprising, but what is different for her is that her rotation starts with 2 normal attacks instead of any sub-skills. That is because to line up with her sub-skill 2, which actually reverses those defense buff, right? Usually people take some time to get those physical magical resistance buff, which is why the rotation works this way. First it's 2 normal attacks, and then it's sub-skill 2 first, then after that 1 normal attack, and then going into sub-skill 1, 2 more normal attacks before going to sub-skill sub-skill 2. So 2 different things here is that first she's going to use 2 normal attack before sub-skills, and then second thing is she's going to use sub-skill 2 before sub-skill 1. So this is just for you to take note. Overall, I think her sub-skill rotation is pretty decent because of the fact that like I mentioned, you do need time for people to get low, especially Chloe and Catherine's buffs, right? Usually work only when units are at low, and at the start of the battle usually it doesn't happen, right, when people are usually full HP, so that doesn't really help. So I think overall this rotation is quite satisfactory for me. So next, let's take a look at some of the good teammates I found thus far for Lizelotte, and the first one is definitely going to be Talia, and you are going to notice a trend between all these units that are good for her, right? Namely, they are going to have a lot of buffs, and for Talia wise, she has a passive whereby she's on the field, she's going to increase the allies' attack and defense by 13%, and with Liz's passive, she's going to benefit from this by having 26% of attack and defense buff, and also this is always going to be on, right? So no matter when you use her main skill, as long as Talia is alive, she is going to benefit from it. On top of that, she also has this main skill whereby it's Tell Me Your Zodiac Sign, meaning she's going to regen mana for the Liz, and also on top of that, because Liz also have her mana recovery, the more you have, right, it kind of snowballs the more, so you are going to have even more opportunity to use her main skill, which is very good. And also one more thing to take note of is that like Talia also have this whereby she's going to increase defense for whoever she shields, although most of the time it might not land on Liz, but I do think that in some circumstances it will, because Liz's defense is quite low, so there is a chance she might get AoE crit, right, as well, especially against Honglan, and that is when the Greet the Stars would land on the Lizelotte, and she's going to be buffed even more. So another good teammate of Liz is going to be Vivi, and honestly, I know I've mentioned this multiple times about Vivi, right? Vivi is just a good teammate for everyone because of her speed buff, but the fact is, for Liz itself, other than the 20%, right, she's going to get another 20% because of her passive, meaning all effects are going to be doubled. So you really want Liz to go with Vivi for this one reason. Now, talking about buffs, we cannot forget about Haru, and the reason why is because she has the Pack Hunter passive, which is 30% attack increase for all her allies, and this is ridiculous when it comes to Liz because it multiplies times 2, like I mentioned, becomes 60%. 60% attack is a ridiculous concept, right? When you think of a hyper carry having extra stats, extra attack, and on top of that, like I mentioned, Liz is one of the highest attack units in the game, so it really goes to show that Haru is one of the best teammates for her. The only factor is that you kind of need Haru to survive, right? So that is one of the big criterias, and also you need to have melee units to activate her Pack Hunter effect. But other than that, I think she's ridiculous when it comes to a teammate for Liz. Now, last but not least, we have Prim, and honestly, Prim is ridiculously good if RNG prevails, and the reason why is because she has a 30% chance of granting 3 buffs, split defense as well as crit rate to Liz itself, and this is going to last for 9 seconds. Although this is not the longest, and also this is quite RNG, usually I would say that the RNG factor doesn't exactly play into factor when it comes to Battlefront, because you kind of can reset, right? So which is why I consider her a good unit when combined with Liz. So in summary, the pros of Liz is that she has ridiculous multipliers. You can think of her like Violet but in buffs sense, but the good thing is that she provides all these buffs by herself, unlike Violet, right? So she provides already 2 of those, accuracy as well as crit damage, and she also benefits 2 times, right, from those buffs that she gives to herself and also others gives to her. So it's quite easy to get her multipliers to a good amount. And also the good thing about her when it comes to supporting unit is that she can be super good when countering the meta units and Battlefront units, especially like Chloe, Catherine, and even Dora, which is quite annoying at times, right? And also Talia, because Talia always have the attack and defense buff on the units themselves, so all the time she's able to counter the units very well. And on top of that, not just only like reducing their physical and magical resist and also defense, she can also remove those buffs in an AoE manner, right? And removing 3 buffs on an AoE manner is quite ridiculous on top of doing damage. So I do think that as a debuffer, she's super strong, and also she has very strong potential to do a lot of damage if she has a lot of buffs on her. On the flip side, she does have her cons, and the first con I think is that her guaranteed crit aspect doesn't really trigger in Battlefront that much, given the fact that teams oftentimes have 2 melee units, so you can't really guarantee it. However, she still does trigger it when it comes to the last few units, and is very effective in doing that. But I would say overall, that is one of her main con. The second one is that unless you have like high levels of investment, and even if you have high levels of investment, I find her to be a bit frail. Although she is a backline unit, compared to other Dex rangers, she does have lower HP as well as similar if not worse defense, so I'm quite worried about her survivability. Getting clipped by a Honglan main or even a VV beam that beams her way, right, it might spell her doom, right, even at origin. So that is what I've noticed. And lastly, I think that she does need a team to be built around her, meaning you need to have like VV Talia. But when it comes to chapter 19, whereby you need to have multiple teams, sometimes those units might not be available for her to use in the teams that she wants to function in, meaning she's going to be a bit lackluster when she don't find the good units to buff her. And overall, that's what I feel about her. When it comes to her cons, it's more relevant to Battlefront. So as always, we're going to give her ratings for the various content based on what we have tested her in so far. And first things first, we have PvE. I do the PvE when you consider Battlefront aspect, I don't think it's that good. I would say I will give her a 3.5 out of 5. I feel like her main role in Battlefront might be more of a debuffer and a support unit, more of that than a carry, because like I've mentioned, the team's aspect limiting her, right, is from chapter 19 onwards. So 3.5 is considering the fact that from chapter 19 onwards, she probably will drop to a 3 when it comes to her role in teams. And also when you fill her in, right, you would lose the buff potential or the racial faction potential for a HP up. So I do think that HP is more relevant in Battlefront aspect as of now currently, which is why I feel like Liz, considering chapter 19 onwards, probably only gets a 3.5 for me. If you are before chapter 19, I do think she can still be a hyper carry before chapter 19, because you only need to fill one team. You can have all the key units like Talia, like Vivi, paired with her, right? Also, you can probably also include Honglan, even Haru, right, to pair with her so that she can really function to her maximum potential. But that is my concern, which is why I only give her 3.5 for considerations of chapter 19 onwards. Now for a PvP aspect, I think she is absolutely ridiculous. Even when you consider triple teams, her removing buff aspect as well as the like fighting units with similar CP is very, very strong. I do feel like she can definitely function extremely well as a hyper carry on like team 3 or something. Even team 1 you can use her as a hyper carry, but at 200 like level sync, I do still feel that she can function very, very well, which is why I'm going to give her a 4.5 out of 5 for PvP aspect. I think she's ridiculous, she's really wonderful, unlike in her Battlefront performances. And lastly, we are going to talk about her boss, and so far I've only tested her in G-Memphi, but her functionality in G-Memphi is insanely good, as demonstrated by my video where I showcase her doing 96 million damage, right? I do think I can definitely hit 100 million, and a lot of people have already killed the boss with Liz in mind. So I do think that from a raid perspective, she is wonderful. She's built for raiding because you are going to be able to freely have those buffs on her and really cultivate or build a perfect team around her. And for the most part, she's going to do massive amount of damage, just like Violette for raids, which is why I'm going to give her a 5 out of 5 for raiding. I think there is no question that she is now one of the top 3 units for raiding itself. So definitely good aspect for raiding, and with the raid cycle being cut down even more, right? I think it's now bi-weekly. Is going to really benefit you if you do have Lizelotte. In conclusion, when it comes back to the question, is Lizelotte worth your Everstones? I do think it's 100% yes, especially for this demon banner. I feel that once you go past this demon banner, her value might drop a bit because it's a bit more expensive to get her. But as of now, she's great value. Even if you were to get her at Epic Plus, she can function really well as a raid unit. And like I've mentioned, raids are getting more and more common. Content like this is going to give you a lot of rewards. So if you really want to compete in raiding, I think that 100% you can get her, and you definitely want to get her as high as possible, preferably Origin, but I know that most people can't get her Origin. But even at Epic Plus, she's going to do extremely well. For Battlefront itself, I think for triple teams, you can consider her as a debuff, right? Definitely useful as a debuffer. As a hyper carry, not as much. So if you are not focused on raiding, maybe it's not as worth it for you to get Lizelotte. And that about does it for this video on whether Lizelotte is worth your Everstones. Just some additional thoughts. I do do feel like Lizelotte is still waiting for more demons to be released, as well as also more buffers to be released where she can get to super OP territory, not just in raids. So definitely I would draw for her while waiting for more units to come in the future. But if you are looking to see how you can perform or make Lizelotte perform the best in raids, definitely check out this video over here where I showcase Lizelotte doing 96 million damage in G-Man PL. See you guys over there. This is Corky Gachas signing off.